I think the lens cap's still on, Andrew. Could you check it?
For the last time, my name is Andreas, and I checked your lens cap already.
It kind of looks on from here.
Ja, like Andreas said, everything is fine.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, let's get started then. What I'd like to do today is tell you the story of how I planned this event last year. Andrew, buddy, could you zoom in on the charts? In January of last year, my boss asked me to plan our first ever annual innovation conference. She said that the conference should be 2 days long, sometime in April, and in Palermo, New Jersey, in recognition of the groundbreaking work being done by our Palermo Innovation Group, which had just patented durian potpourri. She told me just how confident she was in me, so I was determined to do a good job. That same day, I called our new office manager in Palermo, whose name is Tony, though people call him the wise guy, even though he's not that funny, to see if he knew of any good places. And he said that his godfather, Don somebody, owned a nice hotel called Gambino's with big event and conference rooms that would be perfect. So I called Don, and he told me that the facilities were available on April 1st and 2nd, and that he could give me a special price if I booked right away. As a bonus, he said he'd introduced me to a great speaker for the keynote address, his cousin Vinny the Chin, who'd made a killing in spray-on hair. And if that isn't innovation, I don't know what is. By February, the contracts with Gambino's and Vinny the Chin were signed, so I sent an announcement to everyone in the company. Some of the folks from the innovation group wrote back right away, saying that the timing was really bad, because the Palermo University Topics and Research Series, the famous PUTR or Pewter Series, was being held the week of April 1st. This year's theme was ID, which is short for Investigating Durian in research circles, so many of our top PIG researchers would be there. I called Don in a panic and asked if there was any way I could move my reservation, and he told me the contract was pretty clear on the harsh penalties I'd incur if I made that unfortunate choice, and that his boys could come over and explain the situation to me real simple like if I wanted, maybe take me for a little ride. But I didn't like the sound of that at all. So I spoke to some of the people at PU, and after a couple of days managed to arrange to have some of their events hosted at Gambino's. That way, at least, the researchers would be able to attend some of our events too, and PU even agreed to give our conference participants access to the free durian stand they would set up at the hotel. Thinking about durian made me realize that we needed food for the event. So I called every catering place in Palermo and found that all of them were booked because of the Pewter ID event. All of them except the House of Haggis, that is. So I booked with them, even though they didn't have any vegetarian options. I figured we'd be covered because the vegetarians could always eat durian. Things were starting to look up. In March, I gave my boss a status update, and she seemed impressed with my progress. Her only questions were about the AV equipment and the approvals, and I lied and said that those were taken care of. I quickly asked our help desk guy, Andrew, who you've already met and may recognize as the exterminator from Ultimate Fighting, to take care of the AV equipment for the conference. I spent the next few days searching our intranet for the right forms and processes, and eventually figured out that I needed to fill out forms AXB23-BF/OMGA and AXCC94-WTF12-77B to get approvals for the conference center and the speaker. The AXB23-BF/OMGA came back 2 weeks later with a note stating that conference facilities that are not on our approved conference center list need to go through a different process, and that I would need to get an AXB23-BF/OMG27B exception form signed by my boss, grandboss, and great-grandboss, then send it to finance. I did all that, and finally started to breathe relief in the last week in March. That's when the AXCC94-WTF12-77B came back unapproved, because Vinny the Chin spray-on hair, it turns out, was a direct competitor with our new scalp dye, and because of the outstanding indictments against him. Needless to say, my stomach started to feel burning. I must have screamed, because a small crowd formed around my desk. That happens sometimes. But I was really lucky because this guy at the office who knows about cool things was in the crowd. He asked me what the problem was, and when I told him that I needed a keynote speaker for next week to speak about innovation and didn't have a penny left in the budget, he told me not to worry, and volunteered to do a speech on one of the tools sparking innovation at our company, IBM Lotus Connections. April 1st came pretty fast after that. I showed up at Gambino's a few hours early, and I must say, I'll never forget that day. The haggis and durian stands had already been set up in Gambino's lunchroom, and their combined smell had started to permeate the halls. The exterminator was there, which was great, but he'd interpreted AV equipment to mean antivirus equipment, and had come armed with several boxes of surgical masks. It was a stupid mistake. On my part, of course. On my part. I hadn't communicated properly or followed up. But fortunately, the guy who knows about cool things had thought to call Gambinos and asked them to provide a projector. As it turns out, the masks would come in handy later, because several conference attendees needed them to enter the lunchroom. Things were going my way. A couple of hours later, I was sitting at the back of the main event hall and watching the guy who knows about cool things make his speech about connections, and he was amazing. At first he talked about some of the features I know, like blogs and wikis, but then he started talking about something called activities, which are basically shared task lists that allow people to plan and coordinate work. He said that Lotus Connections even lets you create activity templates based on best practices and share them with others in your company. And then he showed us an example of one of our company's own activity templates, one that can be used to plan conferences. This particular template is broken into several sections. The first section, for example, lists all the tasks that you need to do 3 months before a conference, like set the budget and goals. Each task can be expanded to show more detail, and the guy who knows about cool things showed us the detail of some of the conference planning tasks. The set conference date task had a note reminding conference planners to make sure their event doesn't conflict with another company event or a local event, and even had a link to a company event calendar I didn't even know existed. The evaluate conference sites and get approval task had everything I would have needed to make my job in January easier. A list of factors to consider when picking a site, a link to a list of company-approved event sites, and links to intranet pages describing the approval and exception processes. The required approval forms and exception forms were even attached right there. The Confirm AV Requirements and Availability task had a list of questions for speakers and conference facility managers, as well as a checklist of possible AV requirements. You can easily assign individual tasks to different people and set due dates for them. And when someone finishes a task, they can check it off, so that everyone on the team knows it's done. What's more, you can use the menu at the bottom of each task to add comments to communicate status and issues to other team members, or to create subtasks for any task. Well, needless to say, I was bowled over, and I used the template when I planned this year's Innovation Conference. I can't tell you how easy it made things, even for Andrew here. Everything we needed was at our fingertips, and this year, everything went off without a hitch. Anyway, we're almost out of time, so I'd just like to conclude by saying, Andrew, could you zoom in on the chart? Web 2 isn't just about being social. It's about being smart, sharing best practices, and working together more effectively. And that's great stuff, especially if you have a nasty and demanding boss. Andrew, could you cut that last line out before you show this to my boss?
Jawohl. Consider it done, buddy.